Am I the jerk for refusing to let my sister-in-law bring her dog to my wedding? So I, 35 male, am getting married in 2 months. My fiancée, Sarah, and I have been planning this wedding for well over a year, and we're both very excited. It's going to be a relatively small event with close family and friends, very intimate. We're having it at a beautiful outdoor venue with a lovely garden, something we've dreamed of for a long time. Here's the issue. My sister-in-law, Emily, has this dog, and by this dog, I mean a tiny, yappy Pomeranian that she takes everywhere. I'm talking everywhere. Family dinners, grocery shopping, you name it. Emily is super attached to her dog and assumes that wherever she goes, the dog goes too. It's basically like her emotional support animal, though not officially. A couple of weeks ago, she casually mentioned that she couldn't wait for the wedding and joked about what the dog would wear. I laughed, thinking that she was joking, then it hit me. She wasn't. She fully intends to bring her dog to our wedding. I told her flat out, sorry, no dogs at the wedding. Emily got really upset and told me that her dog is like family. She claimed it would be cruel to leave him behind for an entire day and said that she couldn't enjoy our wedding if she was worrying about him the whole time. She even said, well, you know dogs can sense love, right? What's more loving than a wedding? Sarah and I talked about it, and we both agreed that a wedding is not a place for a dog, especially one that barks at random people and can be a bit of a handful. Not to mention, my aunt is allergic to dogs, and the venue has a strict no pets policy. I explain all of this to Emily, but she insists that I'm being unreasonable and that everyone knows how much her dog means to her. Now my future mother-in-law is getting involved, and she's siding with Emily, saying that family is family, and I should just let her bring the dog to keep the peace. But Sarah is standing by me, and we don't want to compromise the atmosphere of our wedding for one guest's dog. Am I the jerk for sticking to my no-dog rule and refusing to let Emily bring her pet to our wedding? If the place has a no-pets policy, then that's that. It's not a no pets except Emily's dog policy. Not the jerk. I've got dog kids too, but the venue does not allow pets, end of story. And even if it did, the bride and groom's wishes govern at the wedding. Am I the jerk for telling my adult kid that they can't have an expensive hobby? For context, I, 45 female, have 3 adult kids who are 20, 23, and 25, with my husband who's 46, all of whom live at home for various reasons. The issue I'm having is with my oldest, Poe. They've been living at home for over a year now after moving in with friends for a while, but the situation turned bad and they needed to come home. Just like our other kids, they're working part-time since the place they work for won't give them full-time hours, and we only charge them $100 a week for rent. This rent includes all utilities, food, personal supplies, and gas for the car. Side note, the car is actually mine, but since neither my oldest nor youngest has a car, they share my car to get back and forth to work, with occasional help from my husband. The only other expenses they have are their portion of the cell phone service. They're under our account. Their portion of the car insurance, student loan payments, and their splurges, meaning Spotify, which they split with our youngest, a subscription to Xbox Gold, and another subscription to a PlayStation service. Here's my problem. They enjoy LARPing. LARP means live-action roleplay. Think a sort of live-action Dungeons & Dragons. However, LARPing can get expensive, well over $100. They owe us approximately $350 in back rent due to us not charging them rent when they weren't working at one point. Now, I enjoy LARPing as well, and I plan on going to next month's event. They started talking about how they're looking forward to the event and how they'll just ride with us, plus everything they're planning on doing. This doesn't sit well with me since they owe us money and would be losing income from not working an entire weekend when they don't even work every day of the week. I want to tell them that they can't go for these reasons, but I know that there will be a lot of backlash. Plus, they might end up going anyway since they have friends who are going and would give them a ride. We already have somewhat of a strained relationship, and they rarely talk to me unless it's about themselves. They tend to either shut down or explode at me if I say anything that comes across as even slightly critical. I've told them that they can't go and that I will put restrictions on them, like not allowing them out of the house, even to see their friends, except for work and medical appointments. I've already banned them from using the car for anything other than those. So, am I the jerk for putting my foot down and saying they can't go and that there would be repercussions if they do? You're the jerk. They might be under your roof, but you absolutely cannot prevent them from leaving the house. They're an adult, and some things you just don't have a say in, whether they live with you or not. That's controlling. Want to ban them from using your car? Fine. Don't want to take them to your LARP event? Cool. You can't keep them locked up in the house though. You were mostly reasonable up until this point. Either stop them from using your car or give them X amount of days to pay you back on rent or they need to live somewhere else. You're the jerk. Expecting your adult kid to pay back the money they owe you is perfectly reasonable. You should formalize a payment schedule agreement with them and stick to it. Wanting to teach your adult kid to be more financially responsible so they can get out of debt and eventually start building their own wealth and living independent of you and your husband is also perfectly reasonable. However, while they may be your kid, they are no longer in fact a kid, and treating them like one is a great way to permanently ruin your relationship with them. You can't ground a 25-year-old, and it's ridiculous that you even think this is an option. No wonder your relationship is strained. Let's play make-believe for a minute. Imagine you have an extra room in your house and you decide to rent it out to someone. This person is not a relative of yours. Your relationship with them is that of a landlord and a tenant. At one point, your tenant is between jobs and gets behind on rent. After a few months, they go back to work. You don't set up a formal agreement with them about paying back what they owe you, but instead you start tracking their whereabouts and purchases. And when you learn what they're spending their money on and you think they're wasting it, you tell them that they're forbidden to leave the house for social engagements. Does this sound completely insane to you? Because it should. If you want your kid to start acting like an adult, you need to also start treating them like one. Everyone sucks here. 3 adult kids with part-time jobs and no car? I don't even want to know how it comes to this. My kid can live with me rent-free on the following conditions: full-time school with part-time job or full-time work. Pay their own bills with their own income, phone, insurance, entertainment. I would carry them on health insurance as long as possible, but the co-pays and co-insurance are on them. Have their own transportation. I don't care if they rely on the bus, use a bike, or own a car. If they needed to borrow my car once in a while, that's fine. If they're staying at home as adults and aren't handling their own crap, they will be treated like kids until they figure it out. I'm sorry you're in your 20s, but your room needs to be cleaned daily or your cell phone gets restricted to family calls only. You get your Xbox and PlayStation taken away. You get allowance for your chores, which is no more than $5 an hour for actual work at my discretion. You will also have chores just for being a member of the household. Want out of all that childish BS? Get a full-time job and handle your crap like an adult. Do that and you can live here rent-free as long as you clean up after yourself and minimally help when needed. I love you, kid, and my job is to make sure that you grow up. Edit. They will have a curfew if they aren't acting like adults. 10 p.m. on weekdays, midnight on weekends. Heck, I might have them sleep in a camp trailer or something when the weather allows for it. As far as the LARPing goes, no problem as long as they can pay for it themselves. If they can't, I will help where I can to have a good time with my kids. As far as the back rent goes, I wouldn't even worry about it. Family should help family when necessary. If they were off work for about a month while looking for a new job, that's just reasonable help. The income difference between my boyfriend and I makes me uncomfortable. For the past 9 months or so, I've been dating a wonderful guy. I have zero complaints about him personally, but something that keeps coming up is that he's financially much better off than I am. For reference, I'm an administrative assistant, a secretary for a large company. I manage a VP's calendar, schedule meetings, handle expense reports, and process invoices. I make about $65,000 a year, but I live in a high-cost suburb with my parents due to some poor life decisions. My boyfriend works in IT security or something like that, and he makes almost 10 times what I make. He's fully remote and lives in a beautiful house he bought during lockdown, but he lives by himself. I think he's planning to propose soon. Maybe I'm just overwhelmed by emotion and feelings of inadequacy, but I feel weird being financially spoiled and worried about what things will look like in the future. I know that it's a first world problem, but I feel awkward trying to keep up. Some examples. He travels every other week for 2 to 3 days. Since he has a lot of hotel, airline, and Uber points, he often offers for me to travel with him, which usually falls on my remote days. We often extend the trip into the weekend or take a light work day. He only has to buy my flight since his meals, travel, and the hotel are expensed, but I still feel bad because it's about $400 every other week. He buys me pretty much anything I show interest in. Like last month, I mentioned that someday I'd love to have an electric bike to run errands in our little downtown area, and last week he bought me one, and they aren't cheap. We've had some kind of date every weekend since the beginning of the year. We've done cooking classes, hot air balloon rides, sailing, fancy restaurants, football games, baseball games, all kinds of stuff. He plans it all. I couldn't afford even a tenth of it. He bought me nice jewelry about a month into our relationship and introduced me to this capsule wardrobe concept, which has basically been an excuse to buy me really expensive clothing and accessories. But they're everyday things. I absolutely love it, but I also feel guilty. An admin like me shouldn't have the wardrobe I do. I want to tell him to not offer me these things anymore, or maybe plan more affordable adventures so I can contribute financially, but I don't want him to lower his standards for vacations or fun just for me. A lot of this probably comes from growing up in an upper middle class family and then ruining my opportunities due to poor life choices. Now I feel like I don't deserve nice things. It just makes me feel like I'll never be able to properly thank him or return the favor. Should I start turning down some dates and gifts? Or should I talk to him about doing cheaper things solely because I want to be able to pay my share, or at least a quarter of it? He honestly just seems happy to spend some of his hard-earned money on someone that he loves. I have a much easier time spending my money on my loved ones than myself. I don't know why, but maybe he feels the same. I want your problems. I doubt he cares. I've always made more than my wife. It's just part of life. Make the wage gap work for you, or whatever they're saying these days. Speaking as someone in a similar situation to your boyfriend, please don't feel the need to provide the same value financially. I don't want to say for certain, but I'd wager he's just like the rest of us. The emotional support you provide far outweighs the difference in finances. Making money is almost the easy part here. Finding someone who's with you through thick and thin and is an emotional support to fall back on is much harder. You should tell him how you feel though if you want reassurance. I'm sure you two can work out a way to make you feel like you're contributing equitably to the relationship. OP. Yeah, he had mentioned that he has not had a good time dating and has had trouble finding someone he can be himself around since he has to be someone else, more outgoing, for work. So I got that going for me. My boss reprimanded me for not answering an email in 4 minutes. I've been at my new job for just over a month and have serious doubts about whether it's going to work out. I'm finding it impossible to make my supervisor, Martha, happy. Her criticism is frequent, harsh, and in my opinion, often very unreasonable. The incident that has me writing happened today when she reprimanded me in writing for failing to answer an email in 4 minutes. Earlier this week, Martha and my other boss, I support 2 teams, but it's an uneven split. Unfortunately, my primary boss is the difficult one, had a meeting with me where Martha outlined all the things I was doing wrong and that needed to change. I'm trying to understand her perspective, but I'm not used to a work environment like this. She proudly describes herself as a micromanager, apparently unaware that the term has a negative connotation, and expects constant immediate responsiveness, over-communication, her words, and accountability. I understand she's the boss and it's her call, but it's been a hard adjustment. Every job I've had before focused on results, not on knowing exactly where I am every minute or expecting instant responses. All week, I've worked really hard to keep her happy and show that I took her feedback seriously. Then today, I received an email which Martha was CC'd on from a senior partner asking for contact info for one of our clients. I saw the email come in while I was working on a project for the other boss. I made the apparently grave error of not stopping instantly. Instead, I finished the line in the Excel sheet I was working on, then opened the email and started gathering the requested info. Before I finished, Martha replied to both of us, sending the partner the requested information, which for the record was wrong, but I'll get to that later. Her email arrived in my inbox a mere 4 minutes after the original email from the partner. I stopped working on my response since it was no longer necessary and returned to my original project. Then I received an email from Martha. "Jane, this would have been a great opportunity to build a relationship with the partner. Why didn't you dive in and assist?" 4 minutes. A bathroom break can take 4 minutes. I feel like she's determined to dislike me. I tried so hard all week to follow her preferences, and she still found something to criticize. If she wanted me to respond to the email, why didn't she give me a grace period of, maybe 5 minutes before answering it herself? Also, as I said earlier, she gave him the wrong information. He asked for the email address, and she gave the physical address. It seemed like she was so eager to reply just so she could blame me for not answering that she rushed in and sent the wrong info. By the way, if I had sent incorrect information to a partner, she would have acted like it was a catastrophe. But when she does it, no big deal. For the record, I understand some things are very time sensitive, but I still think 4 minutes is a stretch for almost any situation. This wasn't an urgent request. It could have waited 5, maybe even 10 minutes. I'm not asking if my boss is being reasonable here. I'm confident she's not. My question is, should I start looking for a new job? This criticism feels so unreasonable that I'm starting to think I'll never make her happy. She either doesn't know how to manage people or has developed an instant dislike for me and will keep finding things to criticize no matter how hard I try. I've been so stressed since starting this job, constantly worrying about messing up, which, not surprisingly, probably makes me mess up more. Is this salvageable, or should I start planning an escape? Update. Your responses were helpful. Martha has messed with my head so much that I genuinely started doubting myself. I even thought you might side with her and ask, but why did it take you 4 whole minutes to answer the email? So for you and the commenters to reassure me that she was being unreasonable was a big relief. As for the update, well, she fired me. Yes, I took your advice and started looking for a new job. She fired me before I could find one. The 4-minute email incident happened about a month after I started, and I got fired just under the 3-month mark. The official reason was that I was making too many mistakes and they couldn't trust me with my assignments. I'm curious how things are going with my replacement if saving a draft in the wrong folder in your first month at a new job qualifies as a fireable offense. I did make mistakes, more than I usually do, but I think it was because of how Martha treated me. She was so volatile that I didn't even feel comfortable asking questions, and she would often disappear for hours at a time. Meanwhile, I'd get in trouble for missing a phone call because I was using the restroom. Many times, I had to make my best guess, and somehow my best guess was always wrong. She would often send me work with compressed deadlines, so I usually didn't have the time to proofread or double-check. Sometimes I even suspected she was moving the goalposts. She'd say, "I told you to do X, not Y." And I'd think, but never say out loud, "I don't think you did actually." Other times it was clear she was just inventing reasons to go off on me, like with the 4-minute email. When that email incident happened, I knew deep down she would never let up. She was always going to find something to criticize, and I suspected she'd eventually fire me, or make my life so miserable that I'd quit. That prediction played out many times in the following weeks. If I made a minor mistake, she'd blow up. If I didn't make a mistake, she'd invent one. For example, she emailed me once to say, "The meeting has been over for 30 minutes. By this point, you should have emailed me to ask what our next steps are." Maybe, but I hesitated to reach out to a volatile boss who criticizes everything I say or do. I just couldn't win. The whole experience was horrible, stressful, and completely demoralizing. The good news is that I found another job, and I'm much happier now. The first few weeks were tough, though, as I tried to put the experience with Martha behind me. I was afraid to ask questions, and I constantly feared I'd be fired for making even the smallest mistake. But as time passed, I realized I was now working with reasonable people, and things got much better. While I didn't get out of my previous job in time, I'm grateful for your responses because it helped me to keep some perspective during a really awful experience. It's hard to accept that someone could bully me like this, be completely in the wrong, fire me, and still get away with it. But all I can do now is look forward. We've all had a Martha. Forget them and move on. I remember mine well. I stayed for far too long, and the next folks at my next company looked at me funny for months due to my blissful happiness at having a normal workplace again. Micromanagers aren't worth the effort. Anyone sabotaging an employee this badly, this early, warrants a "thanks but no thanks" as you walk out the door. Am I the jerk for suing my cousin for $6,000 to pay for my hearing aids after he threw me in the pool? My family is all on my cousin's side regarding this issue, and I wanted some outside judgment. My cousin, 25 male, has always been the golden child of our generation. He's funny, good-looking, and outgoing, not to mention a boy among girls. He's always loved to mess around and play pranks. For the record, I really dislike this cousin. I think he's irresponsible, childish, and annoying. I've had hearing problems for years. I recently got a $6,000 pair of hearing aids. Recently, at my grandmother's birthday party, we were all eating and drinking on the back porch. My grandmother has a pool. My cousin decided he was going to throw me in the pool because it would be funny to ruin my hair, which I had just gotten done that day. I repeatedly told him to stop and put me down in a very serious and not playful tone. He threw me in the pool and my hearing aids were ruined. Afterward, when I told him what happened, he basically said, "Whoops, didn't know you had hearing aids now." When I told him the cost of them and that he would have to replace them, he freaked out and said, "No way." My family didn't want me to make him pay for them because I significantly out-earn him and everyone else in the family. He was in college at the time, barely making ends meet in a call center job. His girlfriend and he have a baby, and they live in a 1-bedroom apartment. He refused to pay, so I took him to court. I won. He refused to make the payments after, so I took him back to court, and his wages are now being garnished for the maximum amount, which is 20% of his total wages. It pushed him over the edge of what he could afford, so he's had to work extra and drop out of college to be able to pay their rent. My family is absolutely fuming at me. I think he made one bad choice after another, and he has never given a sincere apology during this whole ordeal. Had he given a real apology after the incident and asked if he could wait until he finished school to pay me back, I would have been fine with it. But the entitled little jerk is digging his heels in at every turn. Am I the jerk? The only reason I could see me maybe being the jerk here is because it's affecting his kid and his girlfriend. Not the jerk. Where he messed up was not negotiating a payment plan with you that he could afford after he did it. A 20% garnish is a harsh way to learn his lesson, but he earned that lesson. Yup, and he can go back to court and request a lower percentage if it's really hurting him. That he hasn't done so just shows me that he'd rather play victim and try to make her look bad. The court would listen to in school, has a wife, has a kid, and likely adjust that percentage until after graduation. Am I the jerk for refusing to pay for my niece's wedding after promising to cover it? So I'm a 35-year-old guy, and I've always been close with my older sister, Emily, who's 38, and her daughter, Lily, who's 22. Emily had Lily when she was young, 16, and since she was a single mom for most of it, I've always tried to help out where I could. Over the years, I've paid for Lily's summer camps, her college applications, and even her first car. I did this because I love them both and always wanted to support them. A year ago, Lily got engaged to her long-term boyfriend. When they announced the engagement at a family dinner, I said I'd be happy to help with their wedding expenses. I never said I'd pay for everything, but apparently my offer was interpreted as me footing the bill for the whole wedding. It became clear when Lily and Emily started planning a big, extravagant affair, destination wedding, 200+ guests, you name it. I set them down and said I'd contribute $15,000, which I thought was a pretty generous amount, but they both seemed really upset. Lily said I promised to pay for the wedding, and Emily backed her up, saying I always supported them and this was the least I could do. Apparently, they were expecting I'd cover a $50,000 wedding. I told them that wasn't happening. $15,000 was all I could give. Now, here's where things get worse. Lily and Emily stopped including me in the wedding planning entirely. I didn't hear much from them for a while, and it turns out they booked everything for the wedding, thinking I'd eventually cave and cover it. Now they're in over their heads, and the wedding is in just 3 months. Emily called me, crying, saying they were going to lose deposits, and that I ruined the wedding by not coming through. Lily isn't speaking to me. Here's the kicker. Emily and Lily are now saying I'm being manipulative, offering to help, and then taking it away at the last second, making them look bad in front of the groom's family. They claim they never would have planned something so extravagant if I hadn't promised to cover it. But I never said that. I said I would help. I feel like I've done more than enough over the years, but now I'm being treated like the villain for not paying for this giant wedding. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. How incredibly entitled. I think it's absolutely awful that they're trying to take advantage of your generosity. If an uncle offered to give me $15,000 for anything, I'd be so grateful. They dug this hole themselves, and now they're finding out your boundaries are, in fact, actual boundaries that you plan to stick to. Good for you. They could have planned a perfectly good wedding for $15,000 or threw in a bit of their own money for a $20,000 wedding. Am I the jerk for chewing out a drone guy? Yesterday, my husband and I were in our fenced backyard prepping to paint our house when a drone buzzed overhead. I hate drones, but sometimes they fly by, whatever. This one, however, stopped about 20 feet directly over our house and hovered for a minute or two before zipping off. I pointed it out and wondered who in our remote rural neighborhood had one and why they would be taking pictures of us. My husband thought it might be the underwriter for our new insurance company, so we went out the gate to see. There was a guy parked on the street, clearly operating it. My husband called out to the guy, asking if he was with the insurance. The guy just turned his back to us, so I hollered, still from a distance, asking who he was. He finally answered that he was taking pictures for a real estate listing. I informed him, not particularly kindly, that this was my house and it wasn't being listed. He then pointed at our neighbor's house, but that didn't explain why he was hovering over our house, and when I said so, he replied with, "Incorrect," and "Wrong." I demanded to see the footage because I quite literally watched him fly it over our house, but of course he wouldn't show it to us. It ended with him saying he didn't see what the problem was, and us pointing out that people don't like it when strange men fly drones over their fenced backyards, where they have a reasonable expectation of privacy. In the moment, I was too heated to think, and as we stomped back to our house, it became clear that he was over our house to get an aerial shot of the neighbor's house. So why didn't he just say that, instead of calling me a liar and saying he never flew the drone over our house? That in itself is sketchy to me. No threats were made, no cops were called, but we felt pretty justified in our anger, especially given his lying and gaslighting. Our neighbor, on the other hand, texted and said we were lunatics for confronting the guy and that it was no big deal. I asked how he'd feel if some strange man flew a drone over his house while his kids were outside. He refused to answer that and just kept implying we were out of line. So Reddit, were we? Not the jerk at all. If he truly is a professional and had legitimate reasons to be flying his drone over your house, professional courtesy would dictate that he talk to you about it first and assure you that he's not doing anything other than taking some photos for the real estate listing. He could even offer to show them to you afterwards. If I were you, I would ask the neighbors or simply check on your local listing site who the realtor is and contact their agency. I'm certain that any reputable firm wouldn't want to be represented in that manner. Tricking my slacker coworker into sabotaging himself. I work in an office with a guy I'll call Seth. Seth is that coworker everyone knows, lazy, always passing his work on to someone else, and somehow always getting away with it. He'll sit around on his phone or go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. He's the kind of guy who shows up late, makes some lame excuse about traffic, and then disappears for lunch for 2 hours. For the past 6 months, Seth's favorite target has been me. He'll send emails asking if I can help out with a project, but what he really means is, do all the work while I take the credit. I complained to my boss a couple of times, but somehow Seth always managed to weasel his way out of trouble. The final straw came when he passed off a major report that was due to a client in 2 days, dumping it on me last minute. One day, I casually asked him if he was good with Excel, and he admitted he didn't know much about it. Perfect. The next time Seth tried to dump a bunch of spreadsheets on me to organize for his next report, I agreed, but this time I embedded a series of hidden formulas into the documents. These formulas didn't do anything important, just enough to mess with the numbers if someone didn't know how to check for hidden cells. It took me a little while, but I was careful not to make it too obvious. The kicker? Every time Seth tried to copy and paste the data into his report, it would scramble everything just enough to be completely useless. On the day the report was due, Seth slacked off like usual, assuming I had handled it like always. When the client called, furious because the report was filled with nonsense numbers, Seth panicked. He rushed to fix it, but every time he tried to fix one part of the report, something else would break. He came to me, frantic, and asked for help. I acted confused and said, "Oh, I don't know what happened. Maybe it's a glitch." I gave him some vague advice and watched as he spent the entire day trying to salvage his mess. Our boss found out, and for once, Seth couldn't talk his way out of it. He got in trouble for messing up such an important project and was put on temporary leave without pay. I guess he'll be doing his own work from now on. Hired a private investigator to watch my fiancée on her girls' trip, and now my life is over. To cut a long story short, my fiancée and I have been together for 5 years. Every year, she goes on this girls-only trip with her close friends. Something in my gut had been bothering me about these trips. Maybe it was the slight changes in her behavior afterwards or the cryptic conversations I'd overhear. Instead of directly confronting her, I did something I'm deeply ashamed of. I hired a private investigator to watch her during her recent trip. I got back the results a few days ago, and as much as I regret violating her privacy, my suspicions were not unfounded. The private investigator presented evidence of her being unfaithful. It broke my heart. Now I'm caught in this storm of emotions. On one hand, I deeply regret snooping and not trusting her enough to talk about it. On the other hand, the betrayal from her side feels even more significant. I love her, but I can't see a future together anymore. How do I even approach this situation? Do I confess my snooping or just end things without revealing the reason? Any advice is welcome. Just tell her you know. You don't have to give details. She's not going to tell all her details. Be glad you didn't marry her. Move on, dude. When she asks why, say that you know she's cheating and leave it at that. Don't tell her anything else. Her punishment is never knowing how you know. When you completely stump her and she has no idea how you know, she'll start yelling at you, accusing you of all kinds of stuff, insulting you however she can, anything to get you to scream back. Don't lose your cool, keep it together and just leave. Then ghost her. You're done here. Update. When my fiancée returned from her trip, I tried my best to handle things maturely. I gave her a chance to be honest, asking if there was anything she wanted to share about her trip. Instead of coming clean, she gaslit me, making me question my own perceptions and reality. Having the evidence I had, I confronted her about the affair. She was taken aback and immediately asked how I knew. I told her the truth, that I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to falsely accuse any of her friends as some of you suggested, even though honestly, part of me was tempted. She was furious. I've never seen her that angry in all of our years together. Additionally, feeling it was the right thing to do, I shared the evidence with one of her friend's boyfriends so he could be informed. It was clear to both of us that our relationship had reached a breaking point. We broke up right then. Despite it being my house that I financially covered for us, I left and checked into a hotel, giving her space and asking her to pack her things and move out. We didn't communicate for a few days. When she finally reached out, she expressed a desire to talk and perhaps find a way to mend things. But the trust was already broken and I couldn't see a future for us. I told her no. And now, the part I didn't see coming. She's considering pursuing palimony payments. For those unaware, palimony is financial support provided to a partner in a non-marital relationship after separation. I've been informed that due to the relationship laws in our state, this could very well be a real concern. I've initiated the process of hiring a lawyer. During our relationship, I took on the majority of the financial responsibilities, including the mortgage. We had an unspoken understanding. My money is our money, her money is her money, due to our significant income difference. I never thought that my generosity would come back to haunt me. There it is, the update many of you asked for. I wish I had a happier conclusion to this chapter, but life has its twists and turns. It seems she might have the upper hand in this final act, but I'm hoping for a fair resolution. Thank you for the support and advice. It's really meant a lot. I can't comment on the legal part of it because I'm not from where OP is from, but man, the audacity of his ex to cheat on him and lie and ask for money support after being found out. Wow. I hope OP walks clean out of this mess. Yes, hiring a PI could be considered shameful, but his gut feeling was correct and it looks like his ex was only using him for his money. That's so sad, man. Wishing the best of luck. I always find it interesting how people who have multi-year-long affairs want to mend things. What are you supposed to do in that situation? Check their phone every day? Control who they're friends with? Never let them go out anywhere unless you're with them? Or do they really think they'll go back to the status quo? So odd. I feel for this guy. You can tell he really loves her. He has nothing to be ashamed of. At least he had the sense to get proof. I'm sure the private investigator did a better job than any family or friends could have, getting all the evidence he needs for his impending court case. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.